Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of PackReacts. I'm your co-host Jeremy, along with our other co-host Mike. And on today's episode, we'll be talking with a special guest star from the Green Bay Packers. You may have seen him on Packers.com. You may have seen him on the Packers YouTube channel. He co-hosts Packers Unscripted with Mike Spofford. Probably better than Cheesehead TV in general, folks. Probably better. You can ask Aaron Nagel about that too. Everyone's favorite reporter from 1265 Lombardi Zone, Wes Hodkiewicz. Thank you.
Jeremy, that's by far the best intro I think I've ever been given in all my years doing this. I think it might not be 100% accurate, but I got to admit, it was like a WWE type pop there. You could feel the anticipation, the energy getting going by the time you turned it over to me.
That's why he runs the intros. I sit to the side.
Well, our first question we thank you for coming on, Wes. Our first question we always ask whenever we have guests on is, how did you become a Packers fan?
Well, I'm from Green Bay, born and raised. I don't know about you guys. Where are you guys at right now? Where are you from?
Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania.
All right. Just like an hour or two outside Philadelia.
Okay.
Yeah, what about you, Mike? I'm from New York, actually.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, neither of us from Wisconsin. I think Jeremy has some family in Wisconsin. Yep. I do not. I'm from New York.
Sure.
But my dad was a fan, so.
Awesome. Well, respect. I was born and raised in Green Bay, so I grew up. I don't know how many times you guys have been here, but when you are from this area, like, I don't want to make it sound too stereotypical, but it is. I mean, this is the axis that the entire city moves around. So I actually, growing up, to be honest with you, I was more into basketball, more into baseball, just because I'm not really the biggest human being on the planet. I didn't really get past fifth grade football. So, I always followed the Brewers. I just loved any kind of sport that I could get my hands on. And I did know pretty early on that I wanted to get into sports journalism. And if you're from Green Bay, Wisconsin, this is really no better way that you can, get into that field than covering the Green Bay Packers and being around the Packers. So my parents, when I was younger, we got to as many games as we could. We usually were like the Brown County, sort of once or twice a year, usually a preseason game that nobody else wanted to go to that we'd be at. But it was just, that growing up at that time, when the whole everything started changing with Ron Wolf and Bob Harlan and Reggie White coming in, the trade for Brett Favre, and seeing those players, it was really crazy to be in that position and then talk to my father, who caught the very end of the Lombardi era, and then understanding and appreciating what the 29 years between those championships meant. It was like anybody at my age. I think you just kind of get caught up in it and enjoy it, and certainly been blessed and fortunate to now call it a career.
Mm-hmm. What is your favorite part about working your job?
I would say it sounds so cliche, but it really is that idea of, I can't even remember who originally said it or who first talked about it, but that idea of if you don't feel like it's a job, every day going into the building, it's the greatest thing on earth. And to be able to, I worked at the newspaper in town for the first 10 years, and the Green Bay Press-Gazette. 5 of those I spent, 4.5 of them I spent covering the Packers. And then I made that flip over in 2016 to come over here when Vic Ketchman retired, and they had a spot open with one of their staff writers. And, to be able to work with guys like Mike Spofford, who, while I'd never worked with him at the Press-Gazette, him and I were like one generation removed from each other. He had left. The gentleman that was his assistant, that was the part-timer, Scott Vincent, he moved into his spot. And then I eventually moved into the part-time role under Scott. So I always knew Mike. Ryan Hartwig, who was our Packers phenomenal, social media manager, he actually stood up in my wedding. My best man in my wedding works up in the Packers, football digital department or video department. So like when you know enough people and you do this long enough, being able to kind of cultivate those relationships, that made it to be a really easy transition. And when you enjoy the people you work with, you enjoy the job, it doesn't matter if you cover the NFL or if you're working in finance, if you're teaching, if you're a doctor, it's that rewarding aspect that you're not like dreading the day when you go into work. And I've been very fortunate and lucky that For me, I really never felt like I've had to work a day in my life because I've just always enjoyed what I've done.
Yeah. No, so I could add there because I actually work too. Jeremy's in college, just to give you
Yeah.
some background on us. But I know you mentioned finance. I'm actually in the finance space.
Oh, neat.
And
Yeah.
yeah, so like a lot of stuff what I'm doing is numbers, all that stuff, which is not as interesting, obviously, as the product that you're working on, which is football, the Packers, stuff that we're talking about, just having fun on the weekends and stuff. So there is some aspect of fun in your business. In our business, obviously, I find it fun, but no,
Yeah.
you ask most people my stuff, no one find that fun. But really, what it comes down to, like you said, is the people.
Yeah.
And if you, no matter what you're doing, if the people you're working with you don't enjoy, you don't wake up excited to speak to them, and get to learn about their lives, their families, everything else going on in their lives, it's tough to work in that atmosphere. So
Totally. And
glad to hear that. Go ahead.
it's funny you mentioned that, Mike, because it's like I actually always really enjoyed finance and economics. I got kind of caught up in the whole Moneyball, Billy Bean era.
Oh yeah,
Originally
absolutely.
thought maybe I was going to be a scout or something or work in analytics, but and then getting to know Connor Lewis and some of the wonderful people that work in that department and have that background, I understood that I was nowhere near intelligent enough. My ACT score was not high enough to be able to really have any success in that field. But that's the thing is like, life, the older I get now, and now I'm into my mid 30s, like it is that, destiny kind of has a way of just sort of funneling itself in the direction it wants you to go. And,
Right.
it doesn't matter. It can be, I wish I could have been, a finance person or something like that, or economics, but more and more I did it, the more and more I kept writing.
Yeah, and the Packers are in great hands there in that spot with Russ Ball.
Yeah, for sure.
He amazes us every year, with what he could do with the cap and everything. And
He's a wizard.
Yeah. To go off with that, how would you describe the culture with the Green Bay Packers as an organization?
The thing I always go back to, Jeremy, was the pandemic, because that was one of the more challenging aspects I know in a lot of aspects of our country. And I came from the world of newspapers. And the main reason I came over in 16, I loved the people I worked with at the Press Gazette, really thought for a long time. I mean, again, I mentioned like growing up in Green Bay, you want to cover the Packers if you're into sports. And for someone that was a person that always read the newspaper as a kid, I wanted to work for the Green Bay Press Gazette. Those two things worked hand in hand. But unfortunately, in those 10 years I was at the Press Gazette, there was quite a few layoffs. I always tell this story of I was 19 years old the first time I was helping people clean out their drawers because downsizing. And I made that decision in 2016 with my wife that, we wanted to start a family and we wanted to stay in Green Bay. So if you're going to stay in Green Bay, this is probably the best place to be at. And the pandemic, I know there were so many people in the sports journalism field that really had to kind of tighten their belts a little bit because of furloughs, because of layoffs and those sort of things. And the one thing I always give a lot of credit to Mark Murphy for and the organization for is never missed a paycheck. And I know it sounds really, well, it's the Green Bay Packers. Well, there was a lot of NBA teams that laid off their employees. There were a lot of, organizations throughout the country that made decisions based on finances. And I felt like the pandemic was a time in which I thought the Packers organization, like for me as an employee, it was about as strong, in terms of understanding and appreciating the opportunity I had and being grateful to be here just because of security it forged my family. And that's just one small example of it, but it really is that idea that I think they've done a fantastic job of taking care of me as an employee. You see the wins and losses, you see the division titles, the 13-win seasons, the runs to NFC championship games, the highs and the lows, but like any job, it's also how you feel like your employer supports you. And for the last almost 7 years, I can't believe it's almost this April, it'll be 7 years already that I've been here. And it's, I've always felt like, whether it was just the people around me that I work with, or you mentioned like Russ Ball. I mean, I don't want to talk out of school, but it's my birthday. Russ sends me an email, saying happy birthday. Like I appreciate those small things because it's not about name dropping or anything like that. When some of my old jobs, didn't matter if it was a president or a GM, an editor, you didn't always get those kind of emails. So I think that speaks to a lot of it. And the fact that, those are the type of things you don't always see just because it's not the major, huge headline. And we obviously know right now, especially, with the quarterback situation, That's what people click on. That's what people want to engage with. But it's those small things for me as a human being, a father, a husband, that wanted to plant his roots in Green Bay, that I feel really, really happy and thankful that I'm able to do that. So yeah, in terms of the culture, I've always felt it's great, and the welcoming atmosphere I had after coming in from a critical perspective with the newspaper, I can't say enough about. Especially a lot of the guys in the locker room that were super welcoming to me when I was pretty nervous about that transition.
Mike, did you want to give him a question there?
Yeah, I actually wanted to follow up on that. I thought something interesting you mentioned was kind of, I guess, the parallels between, or maybe like the opposites between your experience at the Press Gazette and now coming to the Packers. So would you say there was a little bit difference in terms of priorities from, like, I guess, the editor's standpoint or your boss's standpoint in terms of at the Press Gazette, like going for those clicks, thinking about the economics behind getting readers, and here at the Packers trying to be more like, not necessarily positive, still being critical, but also kind of write about what you think is interesting and what you think fans are going to want to listen to, just not negative and what's going to generate those clicks.
Yeah, and Mike, that's a great point, and that is really the way I've always looked at it, because when I was at the newspaper, it wasn't that necessarily was like, oh, you got to write this because it's going to get this reaction, but it is, especially right now. I know a lot of people that do work for Gannett, and a lot of people that are in the country. It is about subscriptions now. It is about generating content and creating content that people are going to want to read and pay for. And that's because everybody has to pay the bills. I totally understand that.
Yep.
What I've always said with this side of it, I think my 5 years covering the Packers and my 10 years working at a newspaper, one, it helped me with my AP style and my grammar immensely. I'm not that I'm trying to say I'm an amazing writer, but I'm 10 times the writer today than I even was when I left in 2016, just working with Spoff and being able to kind of grow and develop. But it's also from the aspect of, I've always said, I'm never going to write anything that's a lie. I'm never going to write something on the website. If somebody's not playing well, I'm not going to tell you that they are playing well. But what I've always looked at is, I'm not in the finger pointing game. I'm not trying to tell you, well, it's this guy's fault or they need to do this. I don't know what they need to do. I might have a hunch. I think a lot of fans have hunches, but if I actually knew, I would be trying to get my foot in the door downstairs than up here on 2. That's just the way it is. So where I've always looked at it, where I thought covering the NFL is in specific is very interesting, is that there's 53 guys in that locker room. That's 53 stories. That's 53 men with interesting backgrounds, with histories. When I came on board in 2016, one of the big things I wanted to do is I wanted to write more features. I kind of got shunned, and not shunned, but I got sort of shut out from being able to write features at the Press Gazette because I was the breaking news guy. I was the number one guy. Like, I had to, if Andy Malumba signs a contract with Kansas City on March whatever, I'm the one that had to leave my wife at a dinner table because I had to go try to get a hold of the agent to write something up for the website. I got tired of that. I wanted to get back to why I got into the business in the first place. And the Packers have been so receptive to that. Like, I've always told people, I'm like, in 7 years I've done this, I've never been told this is what you're writing or this isn't what you're writing. They give me carte blanche on what stories I want to pursue. The only area where I'm a little bit different than my friends like Rob Domofsky and Jason Wilde and Matt Schneidman, Bill Huber, is that, they listen to, the Aaron Rodgers interview with Pat McAfee on Tuesdays. They're the ones transcribing that. I'm not in that pool. Right. I'm in all the other transcriptions pools, but I'm not in that one, just because, it's what content you're going for. And I totally appreciate what they're trying to do, but that isn't necessarily something that I write about as much. So, I mean, we have our insider inbox. We do a Q&A 6 days a week. So we will still touch on it, but that's the one thing that kind of changes a little bit. So it's a very long-winded answer to your question, but it was sort of changing my focus. But coming over on this side of things, I never really truly felt like I was abandoning everything I did at the paper. It was just sort of exploring some new avenues of what sports writing is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's interesting because I think that's really appreciated from like a fan or a reader perspective too, because like you said, telling stories, maybe, we know the big players like Aaron Rodgers or like, Devontae Adams when he was on the team, but you don't necessarily know some of the smaller names on the team, like their stories, how they got to where they're at now, kind of, if they work their way up from the practice squad or something. Like a good example of this is kind of like DeMar Hamlin in Buffalo, right? Like now we all know about him because of something terrible that happened on the field, but it shouldn't have to take something like that, something so tragic. Luckily, he's okay, or it seems like he's on the up and ups. But it shouldn't take something a tragedy for us to learn about a player like that on the team and get to know about him. So a role like this where you could kind of tell stories about people that have interesting stories to tell and get the fans kind of engaged and understand about some of these, third or fourth rung guys on the roster. Definitely something, I think a lot of fans would be interested in reading and learning more about.
For sure. And like even this year, I usually try to write 3 or 4 long forms a regular season. Then I'll do a few in the off season. Like I did my Christian Watson profile right after the draft last year. But, right after Final Cuts this year, I did a story on Jack Coco, and it's a long snapper. It's not going to get a bajillion clicks on it. But I mean, I was so interested in that angle because it wasn't just that he was a long snapper, an undrafted rookie that make the roster. It was a guy that had never been a college punt snapper. He was only the short snapper at Georgia Tech. And then his last year, they just played him at tight end. So like the fact that kid actually showed Rich Bisaccia and Byron Storer enough in his pro day and his tryout here to make that happen for himself. Because the way I look at it is, and totally with fans, I get it because you want to know about Christian Watson, and that I'm with you. Keyshawn Nixon, the way he came on this year, Jair Alexander, those are superstar name type players, especially once they have their breakouts. But it's also understanding and appreciating like where a guy like Jack Coco came from, in the fact that that's a real human being under there that had this monumental opportunity and maybe a 0.5% chance of actually being able to not just survive the summer, but make this team. Those are the coolest stories to write. And that's also what led to, I feel like I've always had a really good relationship with Alan Lazard and Robert Tunyon. All that started with me being in the auxiliary locker room, the old Green Mile, talking to those guys because, they're all fascinating stories. Tunyon was a quarterback at Indiana State. He probably could have tried to go somewhere else and play a skill position, but he wanted to be a quarterback. And he ends up being a tight end once he makes a transition in Detroit. And then Alan Lazard is this, incredible college receiver that everybody sort of slept on, even though he was 6'5" and 220 pounds. So those are the coolest stories. And honestly, they all blend together because then, you have neat things that happen with Devontae Adams. You have cool things that happen with, a guy like Rashawn Gary when he breaks out. So that's the most fun in this job. Now, unfortunately, the Packers went through a rough stretch this year, losing 7 of 8. People don't necessarily want to read a lot of long form positive, type of stuff during those stretches, but you just take the temperature of the room and you just try to give people the best content you can and explain, but not, sort of perseverate on, what exactly is going wrong when there are, moments of adversity.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. For me, I'm a college student, as Mike mentioned. I'm a sport management major, minoring in communications. What's some advice you would give to someone trying to pursue communications or sport journalism into the sports industry?
Yeah, what you're doing right now, Jeremy, these are cool opportunities because when I was breaking into this thing, it's funny now when I look back on it. I went to the University of Wisconsin, Green Bay. I went to UWGB here in town. I never left Green Bay. My wife went down to Marquette, but I stayed here. So back in that time, they did a communications major with the emphasis areas. And I was journalism, PR, corporate comm, and organizational communication. I never did broadcasting. And I'm not saying I'm a good broadcaster either. I mean, Larry McCarron's office is directly next door. He is 85 times what I'll probably ever be in terms of being in front of a camera. But how did I learn how to at least be able to tread water there? Just doing it. And the Press Gazette, it started there. I was editing videos there for a time and trying to be like the host because, Rob at that time wasn't, now he's on ESPN every day, but back then that wasn't his gimmick. Pete Doherty, Mike Vandermoss, I had to be the young guy that was sort of bringing people in and talking to them and trying to give that aspect of our coverage on packersnews.com. Same thing here. My first title when I got here was staff writer, but they're bringing us in for unscripted. Our first year we did 150 shows because they were all on Spectrum, Time Warner Cable. Doing 3 things with Larry and Spoff, being brought in for Packers Daily. All that stuff is just from repetition and doing it and being involved with it. So that's why I think it's really cool. I try my best to, if someone reaches out, if they want to talk to me, I'm nobody, right? I'm just a person. So I always try to make myself available. If someone wants to chat, I'm I'm okay, cool. So, cause that was what got me here. Rob giving me time, my former colleague, Scott Vency, who's still a preps writer over at the Press Gazette. If people don't give me those opportunities to chat and ask questions and honestly take my lumps too, I'm not where I'm at right now. So yeah, I think the big thing is, so many people think it's the college degree, but it's not the degree. It's that if you get an internship, own the internship. We have an intern right now on our web desk, Jennifer, who is one of the best interns I've ever worked with, whether it was in the newspaper business or here, because she just grinds every day. She grinds at it because she got an opportunity last year and she just devoured it. And that's what's led to Anna Hoosier, one of our interns. She works for the Rams now. Madeline Friedman is out with the Seattle Seahawks. Like, all that started with them being like hourly interns for us and just kind of knocking down the door, because when you get an internship or when you get an opportunity with somebody and you prove yourself, people want to see you succeed. So that's the biggest lesson I learned in college too, is being at the Press Gazette, being a part-timer for 4 years. It's just making sure that you make yourself invaluable, in that when the day comes that you're a college graduate, when you need a full-time job, back then when you need health insurance, that somebody's going to want to, extend their hand out to you and give you an opportunity.
Yeah, I can add to that too, Jeremy, because I'm not on the sports side, but I'm out of college. I have a job now, so internships is the main thing I could take from college. Like, obviously do good in school, obviously, have fun, but an internship is really what's going to propel you to the next step in your career. And I'm glad that Wes feels the same, because I think, I started out in accounting at a Big Four firm. Honestly, the internship you didn't do much in, but it was kind of, most people got the job starting through the internship. And that was like the best experience you could have, because you were guaranteed a job out of college and you could just take it off running once you actually start. So internships are the main thing. And, stuff like this, talking to people, like, most people wouldn't have the, audacity to, start a podcast and, invite cool guests on like this. So I think, people that want to be a go-getter, that's the people that are going to succeed. And, so yeah, that's cool. But another intern wanted to bring up, there's a story about this. I forget her name, but there's the first woman on the Packers was an intern that got a job, right?
Yep, Aaron. Yep,
Aaron,
for sure.
So that's a cool story that I saw came out in the off season. So
yeah, it's neat. And the Packers have been so good with that too. I mean, Aaron's a great example of it in the medical side of things and the training staff side of things. And obviously the way that has grown over the years. And certainly we've seen it this year with DeMar Hamlin and the importance of those individuals, not only at the professional level, but even now into amateurs and things like that. I mean, it's so critical. And I know I used to cover preps too, and knowing a lot of the trainers that work the circuit here in Green Bay, I mean, what they do is just unbelievable, but the Packers have been really good with that, because everyone always thinks like, okay, quality control coaches or coaching administrators, that stuff happens at every level. I mean, it's happening in finance, it's happening in analytics, it's happening in scouting. I mean, it really, that's how people break through. And, it's like, I was talking with Spofford about this. So, Everett, the defensive coordinator right now with the Denver Broncos, he was here in 2016, and he's been a huge candidate here, and, getting some thoughts about potentially head coach, defensive coordinator. Mike was the one that brought it up to me, because you kind of think of him as sort of this overnight success. Well, when he got here in 2016, he'd already been a QC coach in the NFL for like 8 years in different spots, and just waiting for that opportunity. It turned out the next year, I think he got a position coach job with the Rams, but that's what it is. It's just knocking on that door until you knock it down. And seeing those type of guys succeed, seeing like Scotty McCurley, who's down in Dallas right now with Mike McCarthy. Scotty, when he started here, he was like the guy that was responsible, I think, for taking like the notes that Dom Capers had for his defense, like handwritten, like schematic stuff. And Scott was the one that was responsible for like putting that all and digitalizing it and getting it all into like, slideshows and things like that. And now he's a linebackers coach in the National Football League. It's Ryan Feeder was an analytics guy here. He's now a QC coach for Mike. So like, it is who you know, but it's also who you meet and who you put an impression on. And whether it's like that with the training staff and people creating those opportunities for themselves, or just, someone up here on 2 like me, just trying to make a way in this world.
Yeah, it's hard work and work ethic. No matter what somebody gives you, as long as you put your head down, do it, and show them that not only are you gonna do what they ask you, but you're gonna go above and beyond. That's where you get the opportunities that maybe you weren't expecting to have. So that's
Yeah.
great. It seems like the Packers and it's a great stepping stone for a lot of people in their careers within the NFL. Like there's so many just stories about people that started in Green Bay that kind of went elsewhere in the NFL, but are really successful now. So
Yeah, it's funny too, Mike, because it's not even just like in the building too, right? Like, I mean, you look at there's a lot of scouts in the National Football League that have ties to Green Bay or to Pier. Just people that, yeah, this was a football town, and people that found an opportunity somehow, some way, and it's brought them to the Raiders. It's brought them, to Kansas City, I believe, has a couple guys that might be from Green Bay East. Like, it really is. And there's no way, there's like no actual formulated blueprint to it either. It's a lot of time. Like for me, for example, like I got my foot in the door at the Press Gazette because the guy that was the part-time score taker, he left a week before the start of the prep season because he got a job down in Louisiana and he got a full-time job. So that's, if you're working 20, 25 hours a week, making $8 an hour, well, you get a full-time job. That sounds pretty darn good. So I happened to have an inroad to the sports editor. It was like, hey, I'm completely over my head. I'm about to start my freshman year of college. I'm 18 years old, but if you need me to come in and take phone calls, I'll do it. So, and then, 17 years later, here we are.
Mike, did you have a question for Wes?
Yeah, I have a few here. Let me give one. So one interesting thing, I know we had brought up the pandemic before. So one of the big changes in the pandemic was actually kind of from the media side, where over the years we're used to getting access to the players from media side in the locker room, or maybe you had like Aaron Rodgers, obviously the coach, McCarthy at the time, or LaFleur over time in the podium.
Yeah.
But once COVID hit, kind of all the players were either on the podium or on Zoom. So obviously we've kind of went back to the way it was now that things are opening up and we're kind of taking away some of the things. But at least from a fan's perspective, I always thought that was really good because I guess for twofold. One, you got more players on the podium. So you got I remember back in COVID, I got notifications that the Packers went live and I could see like all these like players I didn't necessarily hear from daily if I didn't watch the locker room videos, which come out after the fact and aren't live. It was interesting to hear their perspective. But also, too, you got to hear kind of the people on the beat side a little bit more clearly because now you're speaking to a microphone and not like in the back of the room. So sometimes you don't hear their question correctly.
Yeah.
So I guess my question is did you view that there were some positives to that change? And I don't think they're probably going to go back to it. But do you think there's any things that they could change to maybe improve it? So, kind of the good parts of that time come back and maybe like people like Aaron Nagler, people that were on Zoom because they weren't in Green Bay could kind of get their questions in as well.
Yeah, it was a venture, Mike. I mean, that was wild because you remember before we started Zoom, we were trying to do this stuff on conference calls. We did the draft on a conference call.
Right.
And the first thing we had, the first like organized availability we had was actually, I think it was Aaron Rodgers. And I think it was it after he redid his contract or maybe it was after they drafted Jordan. I can't remember what it was. Okay. But we got Aaron Rodgers and that was where there was that he was in like a Bath and Body Works parking lot, I think in like Chico or something. And we were talking to him, but like all the media were jumping over each other because it wasn't like, hey, Jason Wilde, ESPN Wisconsin. It was, okay, Aaron stopped talking. 8 different people jumped in trying to ask a question at the same time. People weren't muting their microphones. So we heard dogs barking. I mean, it was crazy. And then by the time I think we got to training camp, we actually started up on Zoom. I remember hearing from a lot of players that it was a weird experience for them because they didn't actually, at least at the beginning, maybe later on, but they didn't see our faces. Like, I remember talking to Lucas Patrick about this. Like, when I'd ask a question, all they see is like Wes Hodkiewicz and a black screen. Like, it was very different for them to do that. Some guys handle it better than others, but it was very interesting. Like, for example, I'll never forget at the end, like the 2020 NFC Championship game. I mean, it is this demoralizing, difficult loss. And here's Kenny Clark and Lucas and all these guys showing up and we're talking in a computer screen. Like it was just a different way of covering a football team that we'd never seen before. Our PR staff did such an amazing job trying to get these things coordinated. If they were on the road and the Wi-Fi wasn't working right, trying to figure out a way and get the laptop set up in the right area to be able to talk to Devondre Campbell or Kenny. And, so in that regard, I'm always thankful for it, Mike, because it's what allowed us to keep doing our jobs in a time there were no other options. Especially in 20, we weren't even in there for the podiums yet. Everything that year was on Zoom. So that was, cool. But the thing that stunk about it was, with a few exceptions, guys just couldn't get to know you. We didn't get to know Rasul Douglas the way that we got to know him this season. I always joked with AJ Dillon about that, because AJ was one of the few that I think he actually kind of got to know the media, even though I didn't stand in front of Jordan Love for 2 years, right? Or AJ, that whole class in 20, we just didn't even meet him because there wasn't that avenue. So it took away that interpersonal aspect. I think is very important towards coverage, so that people get to know you and understand who you are other than a byline or a name on a screen. So that's been fun this year. One, getting to know the guys that had already been here, but two, getting to know the rookie class as people again, because ultimately that's what this is. It is a people business and it's a communication business. So being able to actually interact and have that interpersonal connection, I know it is a very interesting thing for us to be let into a locker room 3 days a week, 4 days a week. And, hey, do you got a second? I mean, it's a weird business. There's no real other business quite like it. Right. But, the cool thing is you get to meet some incredible people. I mean, Kenny Clark and, Aaron Jones. I mean, some of these guys are like legitimately amazing people. Mercedes Lewis is a guy that I think well beyond his time here in Green Bay, I'm going to keep in touch with, just because we both have a huge love for mixed martial arts. I mean, like that's what we missed during the pandemic, but certainly I will always take what we got with Zoom over those early conference calls where I didn't know when to shout or not because 8 of us were trying to talk at the same time.
I remember there's one iconic Zoom call that somebody had their what do you call it, mic not muted. I don't remember which one it was, but it kept going on and on. You probably know what I'm talking about. And they couldn't figure out who to mute. And it was like what do you call it, like a song playing in the background.
Oh, dude, there was so many things that happened where there were songs called. There was a guy, his wife was yelling at him, I think, at one point. I mean, it got rough at times, and and then we'd also have those awkward moments where somebody, because Sarah Quick from our PR department, once we got flowing, she would be the one that would unmute us, and then you ask your question. Well, then we get people that weren't necessarily familiar with the thing, so then she'd unmute them, and then they'd mute themselves because they thought they were unmuting themselves, and then the players sitting there like, because is there anyone asking a question? So, but again, that wasn't just journalism. That was your board meetings across the country. I mean, there's a lot worse things that I saw that happened on Twitter with various companies and court systems and things like that, of people getting themselves in trouble with Zoom. But
nope.
We did the best we could with it. And I think from a fan perspective, it probably was pretty illuminating, because now, one, life had slowed down, especially in 20, to a snail's pace. So there was a lot of people that I think that were watching those things.
Exactly. Yep.
And probably felt like they got to know players a little bit better than what they had. And, that's just the way of it. And, fortunately for us, we did get back, and we're back in the press, the podium now, and we got the audio system working so people can hear our questions a little clearer than they used to. So
I agree. It's been a lot better. Back before, you couldn't hear anybody when you asked a question. It was just like the player that heard. But now you can actually hear the questions being asked. So it's good.
And I'm a pretty big laggard. So like people are always like, why can't we hear your questions? I'm like, dude, I don't really care if you can hear my question. I'm just trying to hear their answer. I mean, I'm sorry you can't hear what I'm asking, but then you start to watch the pressers, and there'll be times where I can't make it. So then I'm watching. I'm like, wait, so what did they ask? Like,
right, exactly.
So
yeah.
I understood the plight of the fans trying to get context for what was going on.
Do you have another question, Mike, or do you want me to go back to?
Yeah, I have another one. Then we could go back to you. So I mentioned before I was from New York. Obviously, we don't want to hound on this too much because it's conjecture, but there's obviously a lot of news surrounding like Aaron Rodgers, what he's going to do in the offseason, and one of the possibilities is an idea being traded to the Jets. So I think something came out saying that, like, well, if Aaron Rodgers gets traded to the Jets, it's going to be much difficult from a media standpoint in New York compared to Green Bay. So personally, I don't agree with that at all. I just wanted to get your opinion. Being part of the media in Green Bay, kind of, do you personally take offense to that? Do you think a lot of the media people take offense to that, or you think that's just another one of these things that get people going and generate kind of clicks?
No, I think there are some folks that probably take that a little personally, because I think there's a lot of people that do hold truth to power. I personally really enjoy the beat. The guys that I work alongside. See, I don't really. When I was at the Press Gazette, we competed with the Journal Sentinel, right? And it was always difficult because I was technically competing with Domofsky, but I worked with Rob for 7 years, so it didn't feel like it. Like I didn't have that kind of aggression, so to speak.
Right.
So, but definitely being on this side of it, I just enjoy dealing with people. It doesn't matter if you're a player or media or whatever. Like I enjoy the interaction between people. So I think being on this side of it, it's allowed me to kind of take out all the professional, sort of, I don't want to say bravado, because that's not the right word, but like just the competition, right? To actually see the questions and the people and the journalism for what it is. And I've always really enjoyed the people that I work the beat with. But at the same time, I don't think that's because they're all lightweights. I think there's people that write some really hard hitting stuff. And I mean, you guys hear Pete Doherty asking questions at most of these press conferences. I mean, Pete is about as old school as they get, and he's going to ask you a direct question. I think if you listen to Aaron Rodgers' responses, he's always really appreciated that. Same thing with Tom Silverstein and, some of these other people. So I've always felt like that's kind of a myth, but at the same time, I'm not watching New York pressers all the time. I'm not watching Philly pressers all the time. I feel like there's a lot of people out there that just feel like, well, it's Green Bay, Wisconsin. So, everybody's obviously just cheering for the Packers. And I don't think if you actually sink your teeth into the beat, that's necessarily the case. I think these guys have had to answer a lot of tough questions. If you think about it, guys, the last 15 years, from the Brett Favre thing to what we've gone through the last couple of years with, the questions about Aaron Rodgers and his future, I think there's been a lot of difficult topics that have been tackled here. And I don't think anyone's just been running around with pom-poms just trying to, beat the company line. I think there's been a lot of like good questions that have been asked. So, and Rodgers is such a pro. I just feel like, he's dude I always tell this part of the story. We don't do the opposing conference calls anymore. We used to, like when I started on the beat, where once a week we would get the opposing coach and then a player that we'd get request. And, that's where we would talk to Greg Jennings during his first time with the Vikings. That's where we would talk with, Akeem Hicks, when the Bears games, like it was a once a week thing where we'd sit down and talk to him. There was a limit, I believe. Don't ask me what it was, but there was a limit that guys could only be asked to do it so many times and then they could opt out of it. It was an NFL rule. But even when Aaron surpassed that, he still would do those conference calls with opposing media. So he was answering a lot of those questions from New England, from New York, from Philly. I mean, he was dealing with those media groups. So, I mean, I just feel like in this business, people are who they are, and, they're going to answer questions the way they answer them. And different, media groups probably interact better or worse with other, players. But I've always felt like this is a pretty healthy locker room, and being able to have some respectful discourse when discussing and trying to become more educated on the state of the team.
Yeah, it's interesting too. I think just looking at Rodgers personally, I think his kind of mindset when it comes to dealing with the media and getting his opinion out there to the world, it's kind of changed over the past few years, especially since the pandemic has been. Before that, he was kind of more to himself. You never really got his opinion other than these press conferences. But ever since he's started doing the McAfee show, I think he's been kind of more embraced, kind of taking that opportunity to get his side of the story out and get his personality out there, which I've really appreciated because, we always knew he was a really smart guy, and, he can't be a quarterback of an NFL team and succeed as much without being really smart. But you kind of see the I guess the carefulness he uses all his words, understands what he's saying and everything through those shows. So I think that's been really cool too to see.
I wish I had the exact quote, but David Bakhtiari hit this out of the park near the end of the season when we were talking about it, because he's like, I'm going to paraphrase Dave, and I hope I don't misquote him at all here, but basically he said that he's always known this Aaron Rodgers, but he's happy that more people are getting to see it now, that side of him that maybe he didn't always show the world. I've covered Aaron Rodgers for 10 years now on both sides of this thing, and I've always really enjoyed the interactions with him. And I don't, go over to his house. I don't we're not buddy after the field. But I mean, in terms of doing the job, he's always been very straightforward, very helpful. And I still don't think I've ever been turned down for a one-on-one, whether I was at the paper or here. So I've always found him to be very engaging. He takes time. He's thoughtful in his responses. And I'll tell you what, guys, I'm not trying to, apples and oranges and everything, but you watch those pressers down in Tampa with Tom Brady. He's very good with the media. He's cordial, but it's like 3 to 5 minutes and he's done. I mean, I think Aaron Rodgers' last presser before the game against Detroit, I think it went 25 minutes at his locker. I mean, he usually takes time and he's very thoughtful and he likes asking questions that kind of challenge his thinking. He doesn't just want to sit there and give company lines and just give the same thing over and over again. He wants to be thoughtful. And again, that's the tough part of this business is that I think we get certain ideas of guys and it's just, you're just barely scratching the surface, good, bad, or indifferent. There's so many different layers to us as human beings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What the going back on to here, but his press conference when he first came back from that summer of kind of discontent, right? Even with that off season,
32 minutes.
That was a great press conference though, because, everything before that was up to conjecture, up to the media and all this stuff. But he actually sat down and kind of walked you through exactly what he was thinking throughout the whole time. And, I thought he was very truthful in everything he said. Obviously, I'm sure there's some stuff he left out, but, you really could see like he was trying to get his side out and what he thought, and he wasn't sugarcoating it or anything because, obviously he's in his place at work. And he's kind of talking about that. So I really appreciated that too. And I'm sure you guys from the media perspective appreciated that too, because, you give a question and he gives you a thoughtful answer. And it's not just one of these politically correct answers where it's like, yeah, great question, but let's go to the next one.
Well, and if you think, Mike, I think that was so necessary for him just to talk for as long as he needed to because there was so many things. And the problem with this is you've seen it time and time again with star quarterbacks, not just Rodgers, but I mean, there's never enough that they can say, right? Like they can talk forever and someone's going to pay attention to it. Someone's going to write about it and someone's going to find something to either sway it a certain way or use it to confirm this idea. Rodgers laid it all out there that day. And to be honest with you, I remember standing there. I did not ask a question that day. I was me and Spoff both talked about beforehand. We're like, we're just going to see where this goes because we really weren't sure what Rodgers was going to say. And it's just, you just let a guy speak. And I think the one thing that's pretty nice about Aaron Rodgers, and I've done the stories, Spoff's done the stories, there's been days where at those pressers, you don't really have to dress it up very much. It's just, here's what Aaron Rodgers said. It's all right there. Because I think sometimes people kind of start going down all these different paths and coming to their own conclusions. And it's like with a guy like that is that outspoken and that thoughtful, I just think you got to let him sort of say his own piece. And yeah, there'll never be another one like him in that regard. Because, Favre could be long-winded. And I've heard a lot of those Favre pressers back in the day. But Rodgers' ability to stay on task, too, has always been something that has been kind of an interesting takeaway for me, like learning who he is and kind of the way he handles those situations. Because I can't imagine it. It's not just going to the press conference and talking to 25 media people in there. It's the idea that message is going out to the entire locker room. It's going out to the entire country. And everybody cares what you have to say.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Going back into this season, what were some of your favorite moments? It could be from the London game. It could be a favorite game,
It wasn't London.
Okay.
No, my favorite, I'll tell you what, there was 3 favorite moments I had. The one I just want to talk about really quickly is the Christian Watson end around in Chicago. That's my favorite play of the season because the Packers had been caught on the short end of the stick a couple times this year for one reason or another. That was the one time it was sort of like, gotcha. And it worked out in the Packers' favor. I felt like it also really showed the true potential of Christian Watson. Yes, he's a big play target. Yes, he's a guy that's going to stretch a defense. But my goodness, you cannot sleep on him on those end arounds. The Packers have been running those jet sweeps for 4 years now since Matt LaFleur got here. But they have not had a weapon like Christian Watson. When you have a 6'4", 208-pound guy that can run a 4.35 or whatever it is, that is a difference maker. And it was so good to see that kid have success because – there were so many people that were just, I don't want to say they were wanting him to fail, but it was just, I think there were so many people that were like, well, the Packers are going to be wrong about this. I was not expecting this guy to come out and be an all-pro like Devontae Adams right off the bat, but I thought for them trading up in the second round to take him, that Christian Watson showed every asset, every tool, every attribute that you wanted to see out of him in that spot. I am so excited to cover him now in 2023. The other thing that was cool is I was here in 16. It was my first year with the team during Run the Table. Being in that locker room after Miami, when I think in a lot of ways they did shock the world. Unfortunately, we didn't know what happened with Tua at that point. All we knew is that the Packers got on a big run. They scored 21 points or whatever it was in the fourth quarter, had 3 turnovers, takeaways. And that was also another one of those moments where it kind of felt like, okay, the worm has turned for Green Bay. They're going to be able to get on this run here. All this bad luck, all this bad fortune, it's going to start going back in their direction, in their favor. And there was nobody at that game, guys. It was me, Spofford. Ryan Wood took like an overnight flight to get there from the Press Gazette, and Matt Schneidman had left early. Nobody else got out of Green Bay because of the weather. So covering that game, it reminded me of covering the Green Bay Gamblers across the street again, or covering high school and college football. I walked into that post-game locker room, and it was an entire wide open locker room, and I'm the only media person there. That was one of the coolest experiences I've ever been a part of. If the Packers lose that game or get trounced, I have no idea how I would have went trying to cover that thing, going around and asking guys like, hey, Packers.com team website reporter, so you lost by 28. And you're kind of been eliminated from the playoffs. How about that defense? You know, like, it would have just been really difficult to formulate a lot of stories out of that. But it didn't happen that way. The Packers did win, and it was cool to see. The other thing I just want to talk about, yes, going to London was cool from the standpoint of I never had been to, well, I've been to Europe, but I never been to England. Mm-hmm. We stayed out in Watford, which is like an hour away from London. And we're basically on our own resort. They had food there for, this is the team I'm talking about. I don't know. The media wasn't there. I'm not sure where the media stayed, but being in that environment where the practice field was across the way from the hotel, the NFL had press conferences set up there. Covering the event itself was super cool. I don't know if I'd want to do it more than once every 8 years, but for someone that had never experienced that, you do this for 10 years, you've pretty much seen it all. But that was a lot of fun. And the result was not what you wanted it to be, but Tottenham Hotspur Stadium is just a gem. It is beautiful. It's the best press box I've been in the National Football League. You're almost field level, guys. It was fantastic. You're outside in the fans. I mean, it was almost like you're at a minor league baseball game where you just have like one of those patio sort of setups and you're just covering a game from there. That part of it was phenomenal, but unfortunately for the Packers, especially with Aaron Rodgers' thumb, that was kind of the beginning of some rough patch.
Mm-hmm. Now, if just going off of that, do you prefer the Packers like play at a home game like in Lambeau prefer to like London? Because I know like Packer fans every year, like Mark Murphy has said before, like, we want home games. We don't want to give up because of how much the fan will love this. And then they did this year. Do you think that the Packers prefer, or just your opinion only, do you prefer the Packers have a home game instead of London? Or if it's going to be a away game, would you like it to be London?
I would love the next one to be I'd like the next international game to be an away game. I'll be honest with you guys. I do the game program too. I edit that, and it was weird only having 9 home games. I know it's just a preseason game. It's not that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things, but I mean, tell that to the Stadium View, tell that to Kroll's, tell that to Hinterland, tell that to the Stadium District. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's a preseason or regular season game. It's those days are like holidays in Green Bay, and to lose one of them stunk. And I understood why the Packers did not want to go. They were the last team to go overseas because it's sacrificing a game that means a lot to the community. I wrote about this in Insider Inbox, our Q&A yesterday. It's the same reason why I'm super against these neutral site games. Now this year I get it, but I mean, like, this idea that, hey, could the NFL maybe do 2 neutral site NFC Championship, AFC Championship games? I would hate that.
Right.
We've already taken away a lot of the advantages already from playoff teams with only having one team getting the bye now. I want the regular season to mean something. I think those communities deserve to have those championship games, especially considering Green Bay's never, at least in my lifetime, going to be able to host a Super Bowl. So those are super important things. And my guess would be is the next one will probably be Germany. I think the NFL is going to want to get them there. I remember when they said that they were going to start this rotational series with the 17th game. And I remember talking to some of my colleagues. They're like, well, when do you think we'll go? I'm like, we're going to go next year because the NFL is going to want to get the Packers on the cycle. Because I guarantee you, boys, every 8 years, the NFL is going to be forcing these guys over there. They're too popular. The response out there, oh my goodness. I was so happy for the UK Packer fans, these people that have so many letters that people wrote into us saying, hey, I'm a lifelong fan. I've never been able to make it to Lambeau. I'm super excited to watch them play. They all deserve that. The only problem with that is just the trade-off of, no other team wants to take them over there. So the Packers ultimately have to be the ones that give up the game themselves.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you think the Packers will ever host like a draft like how they did with Philadelphia, how they did in New York for many years? Do you think that would be a very possibility for the Packers to host it one time or like in the next couple of years?
Okay. Yeah, I do. I think they're going to get it here at some point. Now, I couldn't give you a date. I couldn't even tell you right now which ones they were the finalists for. It's like 3 of the next 4 or something like that. But I do think they're going to make that happen because, you can't get the Super Bowl here, but the draft would be a really nice feather in this area's cap. I think the National Football League, with all the history here in Green Bay, this is the place to have it. They had built the Resch Expo next door too, and I've actually been there for a couple some conference stuff now too. That is the perfect venue to be able to kind of augment the coverage, because I don't know if you necessarily can set up something at the 50-yard line in the middle of still kind of winter. I guess it'd be more like spring at that point, but it still can get pretty cold at the end of April up here. So I'm sure there's going to have to be some concessions, but with the Titletown district, with everything Green Bay is built up around here, I think it needs to happen. I want to see it happen. I was kind of hoping it would be, I think what Detroit got it, was it next year? I was hoping that would be the one, but I still feel like in the next few years, it's going to end up finding its way to Green Bay. The NFL moving this thing around, it's the right thing to do. I just feel like this is the type of community that really would open up its arms and embrace it.
Mm-hmm. Mike, did you have a question for us?
Yeah, I have one last one. I'm from New York, and growing up, I was like the only Packers fan in my friend group in my school. And as time's passed, obviously, the internet's been a great outlet for me just to get my Packers fandom out there, stuff like this, but just really like Twitter, Reddit, and just kind of like the Packers community that's online. So my question is regards to, has like the organization itself kind of recognized how strong of a community there is on Twitter and other social media platforms? And is there any thoughts, maybe from the media side, the public relations side, just internally to try to kind of hone in on that, atmosphere and some of these platforms I created, like Cheesehead TV? I know you're pretty good friends with Aaron Nagler and Corey and all that. Andy Herman does great work at Pack-A-Day and Game On Wisconsin, small people like us in theory, but just stuff like that for like the organization also kind of hone in on that and kind of have opportunities where kind of you have some cross-platform stuff between people that are doing stuff privately and the organization. So not just like, the credentialed media and the legacy media.
Yeah, no, I think it's a huge part because there is so much mixture in that now. I mean, look at Tom Grassi, for example. I give Tom a lot of grief, but I mean, he's done such incredible work on YouTube, and he has more Twitter followers than I do. I mean, not that that's the only metric, but it just shows you how much he means to Packers fans, how much he means to people. Aaron's obviously the godfather of all this too, Nagler, and being able to connect with people, embrace people, sometimes talk people down from the ledge and sometimes be on the ledge with them. That is a big part of this thing. And I felt like when I came over in 2016, no one told me I had to do this kind of stuff, but I wanted to build those bridges because at the Press Gazette, I saw how important they were too, because I think that's one of the issues with traditional legacy media is they don't embrace enough of that, because
I agree.
Matt Ramage, these guys, they not only can you help them and engage with them and even become friends with them, they can help you too. I mean, you can learn stuff from them too. Matt's the reason why I set up an Instagram account, for crying out loud, a professional one. I never had a professional one. And Matt was the one that's like, hey, why don't you? And I'm like, I guess I'm lazy. I mean, so I just feel like it's such an important piece. And I honestly, guys, I think in the next 5-10 years, as I get a couple more, gray hairs and probably a few less hairs on my head, I think I'm probably gonna be working alongside people that were bloggers. I mean, shoot, I think the Panthers? I know the Dolphins, like some of these NFL teams have actually like brought those type of Cheesehead TV, establishments into their organization. So you're never going to see, the Packers have so much media that cover them. I don't think you're ever going to see like non-traditional people like getting in the locker rooms and stuff like that, just because the numbers game. I mean, it's too many. Some markets like I know for a fact, like Atlanta, I think if you create your own website, you can probably get into their locker room just because there's just so few people that cover them religiously. So, but still, you look at what like Andy does. I mean, these guys have found their niches and they are extremely good at what they do, and being able to, cultivate subscribers and followers, and being able to work with them has been fun, because I still look at myself as that. I know I work for the Packers. I know I was at the Press Gazette before this, but we all are in the same content creation game. And I think if you're not looking at all those various opportunities, you're selling yourself short, because there's going to be somebody out there that is going to be able to maybe, or wants to engage with your content after that, or learn a little bit more about what you offer that they didn't know before. And then the other aspect of it is too, like, this is going to sound so weird, but like, when you come along the way that I came along, where so many people have helped you, my wife is the one that kind of beat this into me. It's just that, who am I to ever say no to anything? I mean, within reason, obviously, but I'm probably not going to go on and be like, hey, let's go like rip on the entire football team. But I mean, like, if somebody wants to actually talk to me, let's talk. I mean, it's just, that's the way the business is, because I'll never forget this. I always like telling the story. In 2015, I went down, we were on vacation at Disney World, middle of the summer. This is like, what, second year I've been married. There was a couple different places. We drove down to Florida. So we went to various, stops along the way. Well, we ended up in Orlando. I spent an entire day in my hotel room waiting for Brett Favre to call me back for this story I was working on when I was at the Press Gazette, for him coming back and going to be inducted in the Packers Hall of Fame. Favre never calls me back. Literally sat in my room from like 9 a.m. till 6 p.m. It was the worst thing ever. And we're driving back up. This is a couple days later, finished our vacation. This is the middle of it. And radio station, I can't remember where it was from, like maybe South Carolina or something, calls me or texts me and is like, hey, would you mind, coming on to talk about the Packers? It's like mid-July. And I'm like, oh, I don't feel like it. And my wife just goes off on me. She's like, are you kidding me? You were sitting there complaining and moping and everything about Brett Favre not calling you back, and now you won't text back this poor producer that's probably just trying to find somebody to go on their show for 10 minutes to talk? And I'm like, oh man, when you put it that way, yeah, I guess I better. So 7 years ago was my turning point. Ever since then, I basically say yes to anything, because again, we've all been in those shoes, and you want to make sure that you can help people, and because you never know. It might be somebody like Jeremy. 10 years from now, he might be on ESPN, and I'm the one going like, hey, do you remember when you had me on your podcast? Yeah. So just the way life goes.
What's crazy is your position at the Press Gazette. Actually, my entrance into like Packers online was the Press Gazette like live chats they did before any of this stuff happened a long time ago. My dad used to go on those. He was like super negative. He was probably the guy that kept I'm not that negative. He's real negative. But before I think you joined, and maybe there was some overlap, I'm not sure, but Tom Pelissero, I believe, worked for the Press Gazette, right? Yeah. And now he's on the NFL Network. So it's crazy how somebody that started in Green Bay, everyone has different paths. Your path was to the Packers, but his path was to a national platform. Yeah. So that's an interesting story.
Tom's like the 5-tool prospect that came up. I mean, I'll never forget because I was actually at the Press Gazette when we hired him, because so Chris Hobble left, and then we basically did some alterations with the position, and we hired Tom from the Eau Claire Daily Register, and Tom was with us for, I think it was 3 seasons. I mean, obviously you could tell early on. I didn't know if he'd be at NFL Network, but I knew he was going to be pretty darn successful. He's a good writer too. He doesn't write much now, I don't think anymore, but he's very talented. And it was funny that, and he worked his butt off. I mean, he went to ESPN Twin Cities, but then he went and worked at USA Today, and that guy grinded at USA Today. I remember telling a couple of my colleagues, I'm like, I can't imagine, because it's like you're covering the entire NFL. I have a hard enough time covering one freaking team. I can't cover the entire NFL. But he put the work in, and then after him, Kareem Copeland came in, and then I came in. Ryan Wood eventually, Aaron was with them for a couple of years. When I left, Aaron is actually the one that replaced me, and Olivia came in, Reiner, and now Cassidy's in that spot. I mean, it's cool seeing people get opportunities and really thrive with them. And yeah, and everyone has their own path. I mean, look at Rob. I mean, Rob was, what was he? 15, probably almost 20 years into his career before ESPN came calling. And now he's been just killing it here the last decade.
Mm-hmm. I have 2 questions left. Mike, do you have any more?
I had one fun one, but I know we're getting better on time. So
Okay.
I'll be quicker. I'll not be as long-winded.
Okay.
We got plenty of time. We want to be mindful of your time. So if you got time, take as much time as you want.
Yeah. So me and Mike have discussed this like for weeks on our channel, and we've always like wondered of like doing a research of looking at the Packer fans and looking at it. There's so like how many, like we mentioned with Matt Ramage, Tom Grossi, Aaron Agnew, etc. How much do we? I don't know if the social media team for the Green Bay Packers has this. How much do you see of like the engagement of like who has the most of like content creation of like small Packer fans compared to like other NFL teams or sports teams in general?
Oh, dude, it's out of this world for Green Bay. I mean, I don't have exact metrics, but I do have ours, like in terms of how we stack up from our website to the rest of the NFL. And it's basically every single week it's Dallas. I mean, but you guys saw the kind of headlines they were putting out earlier this week. It's hard to sometimes compete with that. But I mean, when you look, every team pretty much has their fan pages, but I don't know. I can't think of any other content creators. Shoot, the Packers probably have more blogger type people than most teams have just regular credentialed beat reporters. Again, I think that's the passion side of it. That's the fan side of it. I don't think anybody's covering this team in those areas that doesn't enjoy football or doesn't enjoy the Packers. I think they're doing it because they feel that call to do it, because they enjoy it. And I fully appreciate that. I love it because I think sometimes that even challenges us to be like, okay, well, we got to make sure we have some pretty good content because, you know, there's going to be certain stuff out there like what Andy does and what Tom does that it's like that pushes me just as much as any of the other beat writers, you know, trying to create unique content that people are going to want to, you know, watch or read or engage with. So it's crazy. It is nuts. And especially from the standpoint of like, I remember when I started in 12, full-time, like the amount of people that have grown from there, I always feel bad because there's so many freaking fans now that like, or not fans, but fan blogger types that'll like, they'll follow me or and they're like, I'll never forget this. There was one dude a couple of years ago that was like he took offense to something I did. And I'm like, dude, I don't even know who you are. Like, I mean, there's so many of them. Like, and then I'll follow one and they'll be like, yeah, I've been following you for 10 years. And I'm like, I'm sorry. Like I just, because there's so many, you know, those types of people that are creating content and doing shows. And I think guys like Matt and Tom and certainly Aaron and Corey, they've proven, I mean, there's a very real hunger for that type of content. And people are definitely willing to support it.
I do know like what I've seen from other NFL teams. I think the NFL also does this too. Is like they go like inside the locker room, like episodes is what they'll say of like they go to coverage and like I know like the Cleveland Browns was the first team I believe that started was like inside like Baker Mayfield getting drafted and going through the process, and they kept. It's kind of like I forget the one show that they always do for the NFL. They always pick the team like the Cardinals or I think it's
the Hard Knocks.
Hard Knocks. Thank you.
Yes.
So
you betcha.
Yeah, so it's like that's what I've wondered. Like, do the Packers have they ever considered that? And
we're probably not the right team for that. Now, obviously, if you miss the playoffs 2 years in a row, I think the NFL can force you now with that. The thing that stinks too is I think Hard Knocks has kind of run its course. I've actually kind of stopped watching it, to be honest with you. I think the last few years have been getting progressively more just very bland, you know? So there's a part of me that's kind of hoping we don't because I remember Hard Knocks when it was like half the season was James Harrison like breaking all the equipment when he was with the Bengals because he didn't want the cameras on him. Like that kind of stuff was fun, you know. But I definitely know we're probably not going to ever be the team that's like raising our hand to bring that stuff in. It's just the way we do things. I mean, it is every team has their own philosophy. It's the same reason why I don't think you'd ever see like the Patriots do that. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I mean, shoot, Kyle Shanahan basically goes up to the podium every week and tells the media, hey, this player has this fracture. This player is going to be out for 5 weeks with a MCL. Like everybody has their own way they go about doing things. But the Packers has just always been very professional, upfront, but not necessarily like, hey, come on in and like see us doing all this stuff. I mean, they have their process, and I think they feel like there's a comparative advantage there to trying to hold as much of that close to the vest as possible.
My last question for you, Wes, and thank you, appreciate taking the time to do this. What are you looking more forward to next year with the Green Bay Packers? Either the draft, players, season?
Yeah, the youth movement on it. I mean, that's regardless whether or not Aaron Rodgers is back. Watching this year with the amount of guys that contributed out of this draft class, out of necessity, out of earning their opportunities, I'm excited to see them grow. I mean, the one thing that was kind of tough the last few years, and I totally get why they didn't do it, but the Packers they didn't put a whole lot of resources draft wise into the receiver position. That 18 happened, they got MVS, but that wasn't a spot that they were, kind of turning over as much as they did when they drafted Devontae in 14 or, Randall in 11. They've been a little bit of a wait. So seeing, Watson develop and Dobbs develop was really exciting this year. And I think, Quay Walker, I feel bad for him because I think he's a good kid. He had a tough end of the season, but I love his athleticism. I think he's going to be really fun to watch. I mean, he had to learn on the job a little bit this year. He took some lumps, but you can see the talent, you can see the speed, and I think there's a lot of ways they can use him. As a rusher, off the ball, sideline to sideline. There's speed at that position right now the Packers have never had before. So watching those young guys fill, and there are going to be a lot of open spots. I think, just with the way that this cap is, Packers are going to have to make some tough calls. So seeing those young guys come along, and then certainly whatever happens, one way or another, the quarterback situation is going to be so interesting with either Rodgers going into, whatever is now the 19th year and his 40-year-old year or potentially Jordan Love. I mean, that's what gets us all out of bed. I mean, there's a reason why they're writing about that right now and not Jack Coco, because that's what people want to know about. That's what Packer fans are waiting and holding their breath on. So, and whenever that decision does get made, I'm sure it is going to be the biggest story in the NFL for probably an entire week. So every year is different. And I know that can kind of be a cliche, but it's also what makes me want to keep doing this every single year, because there's different stories, there's different players, there's different adversity. And, it's cool when you can kind of jump and excel beyond that. And you see them go on, run the table in 16 or surprise the world in 2019 or, make a really dominant run in 20. Those are just really cool stories to be able to chronicle and follow, for an entire 5-6 months.
Mm-hmm. Mike, did you have your fun question?
Yeah, my last one. So, we just got through the holidays, right? And, being in the corporate world too, one thing I look forward to, I'm sure a lot of people look forward to, like the holiday parties that everything runs. So I was just curious, one, if I guess the Packers have reinstated that now that COVID's ended, and two, I guess just give us some behind the curtain insight into what that looks like, and if like the players are involved, and if you guys are involved, if it's like a corporate wide thing. Just
yeah. So this is the wrong year to ask me this because, okay. I'll give you some stories here, but sure. My son's birthday was the same day as the holiday party this year. My son's 5th birthday was the same day. So historically, they'd always done it. I want to say it was like on a Thursday or Friday. It was like during the work week. This year, they did it on a Saturday before the Rams game on Monday night.
Oh, wow.
It was the 17th. So my son's birthday is that day. So I did go because they have free food. And if you guys know anything about me, there's free food available. I'm going to find my way there eventually. But unfortunately, I got there so late. Most of the players and everybody were gone already, but it is neat because especially early on, they always encourage the players to attend, and it's everybody. It's us, it's the pro shop people. Basically, if you collect a paycheck from the Packers, you are invited to go to this thing. That it is the full 9. I mean, it is fantastic. They do a great job. My favorite story of all time, though, and it's a very small one, and maybe it's not even that entertaining, but they bring in these like oyster people, like they are an oyster company, and they have the whole gimmicks. They have like the shucking and everything. They do it on their body. They can walk around and do this. Well, in 2000, I want to say it was 17 or 18. It was the year that Ahmad Brooks was here. Right. I love oysters, but I also can be kind of like, hey, I'm the little sports writer, staff writer guy. I don't want to like keep the oyster person. So the lady goes around, I get an oyster. I'm with my wife, with some friends, and it was so good. It was fantastic. And I'm like, she's like, do you want any more? I'm like, no, you go. Well, Ahmad Brooks was there, and then like, I swear the next like 2 hours, the lady just stayed right there the entire time. I got no more oysters and then that's when I learned, boys, that if you get one of these people, you have to hold on to them because they'll stay there for as long as you want. But if you let them go, there's going to be somebody there, either a player or somebody with a certain amount of, importance that is going to be able to, kind of corner them the rest of the night. So I learned that the hard way, but it is cool. I mean, like it is a fun event to be a part of. And it was cool that it was back this year. It just so happened that like the party was kind of ending by the time I got there. I just was able to like scrounge up some food really quick.
That's cool. And it takes place in the atrium, right? Don't they close it down?
Yeah, it was actually the 4th floor that Johnny Blood, I think it's the Johnny Blood room, the one that I had my high school prom in it. That again,
really?
shows you the most Green Bay thing ever.
Wow, that's cool.
But it's like that big, like the big area on 4. If you ever are up there, like by the Malat Meats thing. So yes, it is technically in the atrium, but it's in the 4th floor level there. So they do a really good job. It's always some fantastic food. So I missed it. I mean, they did a good job too during COVID. Last year we did it over at Titletown. They just closed off Titletown that night because I think at that point we all knew, okay, if we're outside, you're pretty much good for COVID. So,
right.
They did that. The year before that, we weren't able to do anything. We just got a box of meat. It was kind of like a jelly of the month club kind of thing, but no, I mean, it is. Again, it goes back to the culture thing. It goes back to, when I was at the paper, not that the Press Gazette didn't do a lot of cool stuff for me, but Christmas time, we got like a $25 gift certificate to like Festival Foods in Green Bay, like to get that. And then, I mean, it shows you just being in the National Football League and being a part of that, and also not having an owner probably also helps. So, but yeah, it was a pretty cool experience.
Awesome. And thank you as well for joining. Really appreciate it. Like you said, you didn't have to join this. And it's great for you to give time to two, new podcasters, a lot of people in the space. So I really appreciate you hopping on tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. It was a lot of fun. And Jeremy, good luck with everything. I like you even. You know what's funny? If I didn't even know, I was like, boy, you have the most college-like setup possible. You got the cinder block walls like painted over with the white.
Exactly.
Like it's like that is a dorm room if I've ever seen one before.
I got a scarf for Christmas of the Packers here. I got like so much other. I got like every time I go to a Packers game, I always get a game program. That's a must.
Hey!
Look, there you go.
That's a must habit for me. I always have I always get, because I'm a season ticket holder, so my dad always gets me the coin that you always have like your schedule, which is the one unique thing I always love. I didn't like the thing that they gave years ago was like you get grass seeds from Lambeau Field. I'm like, okay, that's cool, but like, can I get something better at least? Like that's the one thing, because I know
I think I still have mine at my house, by the way. I don't think I ever planted them.
I still haven't planted mine either, but I know what is it? I know, like, I think it was back in like 2007. I think I was like a little kid back then. And my dad, he gets like a Ryan Grant's like autographed mini helmet. I'm like, okay, where's that as a season token? Or like, can we get something like that maybe once in a while? That's what I always wonder as a
that's the one, but it's cool. I mean, like that's the neat thing. It's the most fun part of this job. I mean, the game day stuff, and I've always said like that was what I missed the most during COVID was like getting out of your car to walk up to the stadium and smelling brats in the air. I mean, that's what football's all about. It's what Green Bay football is all about. And it's cool that it's back. And this past year especially was the most fun I think I've had, even with all the struggles with the team, just being able to feel that energy again at Lambeau and people being comfortable and in their own skin again was really, really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Next time you're at the game, Jeremy, tell the guy that sells you the what do you call it? The
game
program that you did a podcast with the editor. You'll probably think you're nuts, but
or just text me and save the $6. I'll bring one down for you. So.
I think every time since I've gone to a Packers game, it's been since middle school, my 7th grade, and every time I always get one, and I stay with my second cousins because they're out like in Wisconsin outside Milwaukee. Every time I go there, they always tell me if the Packers lose, keep driving, don't stop. You're not welcome back. Yeah, so the first year it was like we lose to the Colts. That was the annoyance. We lose. Then the next year I go lose to the Lions, and it was like I think it was the punt or the kickoff return from the Lions that one game where he got that. And so my second cousin tells me, "All right, you're 0-2. If you go 0-3, you are never welcome back." So that game that I went to, the third game, was the Packers-Bengals game. And that was the game I will never forget because of what Geronimo Allison did to break. He broke Pac-Man Jones's ankles. And I will never forget that stadium goes so hype and loud. That was the funniest and, well, not the funniest. That was funniest.
Most fun,
Yeah, most fun. And that was like, okay, I'm still alive. I can go to another Packers game. And then ever since then, I have not lost since I've been.
Hey.
The one most frustrating game I've been to was the Packers Vikings game where it ended in a tie.
Yeah.
And that was the one
yeah.
I was like, why did this happen? But the neat thing when I was at that game was I sat right next to a former Packers family, which was Vince Beagle at the time.
Sure. Yeah.
His grandmother and his mother-in-law were at the game sitting were next to him when that occurred. And that was a unique thing. But where I was sitting, it was like you couldn't tell, like, because I was watching like for the Vikings to kick like the potential game-winning field goal, and I could never tell. You have to wait for the fans to give your signal. I'm like, okay, is it good? Is it no good?
Yeah.
That's the one thing I will not like about my seating wise. But besides that, it's just like a fun experience to do. Like every year when I go, it's just fun just to see it. It's just like a fun, awesome experience. I love like the Packers, like they're like unique fans. Unlike where I'm from, like Philadelphia, like you'll see the Eagle fans just like boo and just do whatever to you. But the Packer fans are like the nicest fans. I feel like just like not be like as an NFL fan and not just being biased to the Packers. I think they're the most unique and like fans around like the whole fan base of the NFL with like coming around from different cultures, like how I mentioned, like with London, Europe. We had somebody on what was it from Australia? We had somebody on just like watching us for some reason. That's the one unique thing I don't understand how Packers like you always see cheeseheads everywhere.
Yeah.
No matter where you go. And like every year when I go to the summer, once a year, I will always see a Packers fan car when I'm driving to the beach and it goes like go Pack go. And I don't understand how. And that's occurred for me like the last 6 years. I always find a Packers fan just rooting. I'm like, this is the best fans I've ever seen.
And that's why London was so cool, just because like that crowd, man, it wasn't like a typical home game because it was like a soccer game. People just chanted the entire time. They were cheering the entire time. So it wasn't like it was just, okay, on offense, the Packers had some, crowd noise to deal with too, but people were just so excited. And it's funny when you mention that thing about, Packer fans in Green Bay, and I think Buffalo's a very much similar. I don't know if it's about the small market thing, but I think it's these areas that really appreciate football, professional football for what it is. Cincinnati, they're just incredibly welcoming, and it's neat. Now, certainly, you want to still support the team. You want to create as much noise as possible for the opposition, but I've always said it. If whether you're a Packer fan or not, you have to experience one game at Lambeau Field at least once, because the history is one thing, but the ability to be a part of that kind of energy is really cool too.
And I just got to add one thing, and we'll leave it at that. But Jeremy was mentioning that he was a bad luck charm for a little bit. I think Joe Barry needs to actually pay for me to go to the game, because I've been to 2 games in my life in Lambeau. One was I think 4 years at this point, but they were playing the Buffalo Bills.
Oh, the shutout.
The shutout, right? And I've been to one other game. Can you guess which game it is?
Oh, shoot.
It was last year and has something to do with why Joe Barry would want to pay me to go to the game.
I'm trying to think.
Not as in this year, the year before that.
The year before. I'm trying to think. Was there another shutout? I'm trying to think.
Yes, there was.
Did you go to 2 games and the opposition never scored?
Yes.
That's fantastic.
So the Bills was a shutout, and the Seahawks 2 years ago.
The Seahawks. Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, the Russell Wilson didn't even bother to show up for that game. I remember that
right.
one now.
That was right when Rodgers was coming back from COVID, I believe.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes. Yeah.
So,
they really, they smacked it. Wow. Good for you.
Yeah.
I don't know whether or not to, because it's going to be difficult to pull off the trifecta on that. But that's, I don't know anybody else that's gone to 2 games and has just not even seen the opponent score.
I've been to away games where, I'm from New York, so I go all the time to New York. I went to the Cleveland game actually when, Adams had that walk-off touchdown in Cleveland. That was a fun game to go to. It was actually interesting. Jeremy and I were supposed to go to the NFC Championship game last year. So, if that was the trifecta for that going into the Super Bowl with a shutout, that would have been great. But, unfortunately, we got our refunds on there.
We did.
Listening to what's his name, the Joe Burrow. We got our refunds for that one. But
you better get your refund. Yeah, that's the agony of defeat and thrill of victory, right? I mean, that's what makes the NFL so great.
Yeah, but hopefully I do pull off that trifecta. That's definitely a great stat to have right now. But okay, cool. No, I think that that was really great for you to come on, and really appreciate it. Hopefully some of the viewers appreciate our conversation tonight. I definitely did. You have anything to add, Jeremy?
Just like to add one thing for Wes. I got my game program exactly
Yes,
exactly for
let's
you.
go. There's a great defensive line story in there. Unfortunately, Dean Lowry went on IR right before the game started.
Oh, good.
I think we went to print and then Dean went on IR immediately after that. But that's why you have depth.
This is the one thing I always wonder if when do these game programs come out, and how much does it as a week? Because I always wonder, I'm like, okay, there's no way it's gonna be ready by 90 minutes, and all of a sudden, oh, Roger's not playing, or somebody
that. Yeah, we do the best we can with it. Now, the nice thing is most of the time the Packers will make all their transactions on Tuesdays. So barring the fact, hopefully that nobody gets hurt in practice or they're waiting on something, typically the roster is pretty much set. But yeah, it's happened a couple times where we've gotten bit. I remember there was one, I think it was in 16 or 17, where I think Balaga and Dave were both questionable, and then neither played, and those are the two guys on the cover. I mean, that stuff does happen, but for the most part, because we go to print for a regular Sunday game, we go to print at Wednesday afternoon, and then we get them at the stadium here on Friday, and then on Saturday, they'll go pass them out at the suites and everything, and then obviously have them ready for purchase. So a couple times it's happened, but that's the newspaper business. That's the publications business. Occasionally that stuff's going to happen.
I will say that this man, he gave me the greatest ever I will ever see of the Packers special teams. The only time I've ever seen a great special teams Packer play was the block punt against the Minnesota Vikings, that tie game. I believe it was by Josh Jackson, if I'm correct.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. Yep.
Now you can change this of the new kickoff return touchdown, not Cobb anymore. It's Keyshawn Nixon. That was the best thing I've ever seen, where I saw an offensive touchdown, defensive touchdown, special teams. That was the best. I don't care what happened the rest of the season. That was the best game I ever went to.
It was their most dominating performance. I was really happy with that, because I'm sure everybody, when they saw him score, was like, oh, 105-yard touchdown. I'm like, that was the inside the numbers player this week, Keyshawn Nixon. So we already had knocked out usually if we do our covers, we already did our cornerbacks cover earlier in the season before Keyshawn really had been playing. So we always try to find ways to incorporate the guys that maybe are on the covers. Keyshawn Nixon. And we got him in that program.
I got one last question real quick while we got you. So in the press box, right, you're not supposed to cheer, right? Isn't it against the rules? So is that very difficult for a play like that? You see him kind of take off, and you see green grass in front of him.
Here's the thing, Mike. We I get such tunnel vision. It never even hits you, right? Because during the games, Spoff is running our blog. And I'm running our quarter by quarter results. I'm working. I'm not just covering the game. I actually have other assignments. So the thing that was funny about that is we're certainly watching the play and we're watching it develop. But the first thing we're both thinking is Spoff is making sure that he gets the information in the blog. And I'm thinking, holy crap, this is going to end up being the headline for our quarter summary. So I'm already communicating with our intern to get that photo ready. So while cheering itself is not a big deal, there's definitely been some times where I've probably let out an expletive or two just based on just the complete madness of a Hail Mary. I mean, dude, 10 years of covering Aaron Rodgers and, 8 years of covering Devontae Adams and Jordy Nelson. I mean, there are so many crazy things that I've seen. I mean, I think the game that I always get back to is 15, right? With the Richard Rodgers Hail Mary. Yes. I'm writing on deadline. It's a night game. I have a 1,000-word gamer ready to go for the print about how the Packers season's at a crossroads. They lost this game in Detroit. Everything is working against them. Well, I don't know if you guys know anything about how the structure stories go, but when you have a play like that at the end of the game, it's kind of hard to be able to use the rest of your 1,000-word story ripping on the team and talking about how the season's over when something like that happens and now the Packers are suddenly, being able to right the ship. So it's always a very interesting thing, whether it's a positive like Nixon or whether it was last year after the field goal with Robbie Gould. Yeah. It is still a job to do. And you have to kind of keep going on that. Some media, not necessarily Green Bay, but other places I've been there's some places where it's holy crap! Are you working for the team, or is it I'm not going to name cities or anything, but there's been a couple where I was kind of blown away by how the media responded to certain things. But For us, for the most part, it's other than a few gasps and some, shouts of acknowledgement of astonishment. Usually we do a good job of keeping that in check.
And then, did you go to the Super Bowl in 2010, or were you doing other things?
I did not. I was a little guy back then. I was actually,
right.
I was at the Press Gazette, but I was graduating. So my role the night of the Super Bowl was I ran the live chat. This was just when live chats were starting, and they were trying to take that out of the reporters' hands so they could just focus on covering the game. So I was the one responsible in Green Bay for just keeping comments going, answering a few questions if I could, but just basically just keeping people on our website. When the game ended, I had to go into the Press Gazette, and they put us out on the street. I went down to Washington Street, kind of just did some. We did start tweeting back at that point, so we were kind of covering so when people were celebrating, WIXX, the radio station in town, pulled up at the corner of Washington Street and was just blaring "Green and Yellow" by Lil Wayne the entire time. So I was in that whole madness, but what happened was, if you guys know anything about the way newspapers work, I had already prepared basically a game by game breakdown summary, sort of like a long form oral history of the Packers run up to winning the Super Bowl. And we always have that ready, not only just to buy it, but you remember seeing it on the field, guys were holding newspapers, ours and the Journal Sentinels. Yeah. Well, all that stuff's printed ahead of time. And then if they win, hey, here we are. If they lose, it just all goes in the garbage can. Well, beforehand, I was responsible for that too. So I was just a little worker bee back then. I wish I could have gone. If I was maybe 1 year older, I probably would have been able to, because I was still a part-timer at that point and was still in college. But it's the only thing I haven't done yet, guys. I haven't covered a Super Bowl. I knocked off London. I've been to all but 2 stadiums in the NFL now at this point. I missed NRG in Houston because of COVID. And then I haven't been to the new Vegas stadium yet. So the one thing I'm kind of missing from the resume there is the Super Bowl.
Next year we're in Vegas, so I believe so.
Get that one. Yeah.
There you go.
Unfortunately, unless it works out with this crossover game or something, I'm not going to probably have another shot at NRG until 28. So I got to at least work in the newspaper, or I got to keep doing this until I'm 41 at least. So
there we go.
All right.
Well, awesome. Yeah. Thank you for joining. Did you have anything? I want to give you.
No.
Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, appreciate you guys having me. It was fun chatting with you, and we'll now venture off into the offseason. As you can see, I didn't even come dressed. I'm usually in my Packers stuff. I'm in my definite civilian clothes this evening. So,
one thing that we always like to do, Wes, before we hop off is we like to go through each of us, including the guests, of where can they find you. So we'll start with Mike just to give a quick example, and then we'll go through you, and then we'll go through me.
Sure.
So
yeah. You can find me here on the PackReacts podcast. My Twitter at Arvo15. I run the PackReacts podcast, so you can find me there on Twitter mainly, on Reddit, and I have a Titletown Memes Instagram page. Haven't been using it that much recently, but I like to dabble in the Packers memes here and there, so that's always fun. Wes, you want to go next?
Oh, I'm next. Okay, sorry. Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm Wes Hodkiewicz. You can find me at Wes Hod. On Twitter. It used to be Weston Hodkiewicz, but that's when characters used to matter, so we had to shorten it up back in the day. So yeah, at Wes Hod on Twitter and Instagram, and on Packers.com. Although in a week I'm going to go on vacation, so then I won't be on Packers.com for an extended period of time. But then we'll be back for the scouting combine, and it'll be fun, and we'll have more coverage and stories.
Shout out Matt Ramage for the Instagram.
Yeah, and thanks to Matt for my Instagram account, which I sometimes allow to go too dormant and may need to start paying Matt just to run it for me. But yeah, it is technically alive now. So if you want to go follow me on Instagram, you can usually get either a post once a month and a couple stories a few times a week.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
Well, for me, folks, you know where to find me on the YouTube channel as always usual. Latest videos are going to come out soon. I'm going to do my other YouTube channel of talking about the Philadelphia Phillies offseason preview, what we did in Muse, and upcoming GOAT series I like to do with a new feature segment on my football channel here. I'm going to have a GOAT series, and it's going to go through each position of every NFL position, including punters, kick returners, all you can name, including coaches. And I pick 5 names out of a hat, basically, or do my research that I think that deserve to be in the conversation, as you can say. And I'll have an honorable mention, not to rule anybody out that you think that, oh, he should be in there, not have any snaps of it. And I choose my GOAT at the end of each episode. And that will go on probably for a summer thing to do. So first episode, I'm going to be filming this weekend with my friend and covering punters, as he's the punter expert. So need a little expert on like position wise. So have all the lists done. I just need to put in the script, and then we can start filming for that.
Jeremy, when's the long snappers?
Long snappers. Long snappers, I probably will have that. I will have it like the 5th episode at least.
Oh, okay. All right. We're going to have a long snappers episode. I just want to make sure you weren't shortchanging the long snappers here. If we're going to do punters.
Long snappers are important. Back in high school, the Giants won the Super Bowl right after we lost to them, I believe. And I was in a physics class, and everyone took the day off to go to the parade. And my physics teacher was like, I'm a Packers fan, so I didn't go, obviously. He was like, how do we get people that went to the game that weren't actually Giants fans in trouble, right? So we came up with a quiz, and my question was, who's the Giants long snapper? Everyone who didn't get that question wrong got like extra homework or got into detention. The people that actually got that question right were okay to go because they were actual Giants fans. At
you
the
actually
time,
earn it.
Right.
Yeah.
I always ask that question. Brett Good was our Brett Good, I guess is how you pronounce his name, but was our long snapper at the time and a real staple at that position for the Packers. Since then, we've had a little bit ups and downs, but Jack Coco kind of took that role this year. But I always ask that question because if you're not a real fan of the team, you'll never know who the long snapper is.
There's no excuse because like with Good, he was there for 10 years. Rob Davis was there for like 48.
Right.
You should know who your long snapper is. Now, I would give people a little bit of a reprieve here because the Packers have had quite a bit of shifting the last few years. But especially like in the Giants case where I think Trey Junkin was there for all those. I mean, you should know who your long snapper is.
I agree.
It's a big part of being a fan.
I agree.
That's the one thing that I was talking with one of my friends who's, as I mentioned, with a punter expert. Is like, when I was playing this out, I'm like, okay, we're going to do this by going through the positions that are so underappreciated that I will save the quarterbacks for last people because I'm not getting that out right away. I want to do the most that people will not think of: punters, kick returners, long snappers, even the like water boy, if you want to go that far out there. This is what I want to do, is to give each position the most underappreciated guys, and then we have to go by the end of each episode, and then you guys can vote, and the fans in general can vote, who is their greatest NFL player of all time, including all the positions.
You got to do digital reporters next. And then the problem is we might have a bias here. You know?
Well, I'll certainly put Wes above and Nagler. That's for sure. We'll put that there. But besides that, we'll see where Rob Demoski and Jason Wilde and Tom Silverstein are. So we'll see about that.
You could slot us all in there.
Exactly.
All right, cool. Do we want to sign off, or we're going over here?
Yeah, we can sign off at this point. Yeah.
All right, so we usually sign off with the typical Go Pack Go. Wes is an employee for the Packers, so he can do that. If we have some people that are on the beat, maybe they couldn't do that, but Wes can, I would assume, right?
Yeah. Ready.
Okay, ready? Jeremy, you got it?
Do you want to? All right. And as always, Packers, go Pack.
Go. There we go. I got in there eventually.
All right.